Okay, we are on day 23 and we're in Genesis 46, and it starts off where Jacob is getting ready and his entire family to head out for Egypt because God had sovereignly provided for them in Egypt through Joseph. And before they left, obviously Jacob was very hesitant because he was going into pagan territory basically. And God spoke to Jacob in a dream. And I love how God gives us peace and speaks to us, that if we're ever hesitant or worried about something, we can pray about it, and the Lord is going to reveal to us his plan so we don't have to live in fear. Isn't that so beautiful? So this is what the Lord says. God called Jacob, and Jacob said, "Here I am." God said, "I am God, the God of your father." The voice said, "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make your family into a great nation. I will go with you down to Egypt, and I will bring you back again. You will die in Egypt, but Joseph will be with you to close your eyes." What a comfort that must have been to Jacob, because you know he was probably very hesitant going into pagan territory. So after that, it goes through the genealogy, all the descendants, the 12 tribes of Jacob. And after that, I love how God shows us favor even amongst our enemies. It says here that when they got to Pharaoh, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Now that your father and brothers have joined you here, choose any place in the entire land of Egypt for them to live. Give him the best land of Egypt. Let them live in the region of Goshen. And if any of them have special skills, put them in charge of my livestock too." Then Joseph brought his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. So God even used Jacob to bless Pharaoh when he probably wasn't even a believer at the time. I believe he probably became one when he was around Joseph and all the descendants. But here's the amazing part, is the Egyptians hated shepherds. They were known as the lowest of society. And yet, God chose this Pharaoh, even though the Israelites were hated and they were considered lowly. God gave them such favor in the land and had Pharaoh even give them the best choice of land that there was. It's just so amazing. So what happens from here is the famine got very severe. And it says that Joseph provided his entire family, down to the young children, with as much food as they needed or wanted. How amazing is that? That even in famine, God will take care of his chosen people. So then it goes on and says that pretty soon, after the people had already sold all of their grain to Joseph, then they had little left. Eventually, they actually had to give their money. When their money was gone, then they had to sell their cattle. And when all their livestock was gone, they finally came to Joseph and said, "We have nothing. We have no money left and no cattle to sell. We already sold our grain, and we're going to die. We're all going to die here." And that's when Joseph said, "Well, sell me your land." So then the people all had to sell their land to get food because they were all starving. And as you know, Joseph stored up these huge silos of food and prepared for the 7 years because God had warned them. And then after their land was gone, the people had to sell themselves into slavery. So then Pharaoh owned everything. He already got their grain, their money, all their livestock, then their land, and then they had to sell themselves. Well, that's where the saying came from. I believe it's good to be king, because basically the people had nothing, and it says it all went into Pharaoh's treasuries, everything. So you can imagine why Pharaoh gave Joseph his family favor, because Joseph made him the wealthiest man probably that walked on the earth at that time. And it says at the very end that Jacob lived 17 more years, and he lived to be 147. And the one thing he did is he made Joseph promise that Joseph would take him back and not bury him in Egypt. He did not want to be buried there. He wanted to be buried in the land that the Lord had given his descendants, Abraham and Sarah, his grandfather, and on down. Day 23, we are in Matthew 15. And I think at this point, Jesus was completely exacerbated by the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because they kept looking at the outer. And they said to Jesus, "Why do you disobey the old age traditions?" And what Jesus was telling them is it's not about the outward, what you do in front of public. The Pharisees and the Sadducees would fast and put on sackcloth so people would think they were great. And they would follow every law down to the T, yet they would talk terrible about people. I mean, it's amazing. So Jesus says it's not what's on the outside that's important, it's what's in your heart. And I'd like to read you a text from this. It says, "People honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship is a farce, for they teach man-made ideas as commands from God. It's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you. You are defiled by the words that come out of your mouth." Isn't that the truth? Because whatever comes out of your mouth is in your heart. That's the truth. You can take that to the bank. Then Jesus goes on to say, "Anything you eat passes through the stomach, then goes into the sewer. But the words you speak come from the heart. That is what defiles you. For from the heart comes evil thoughts, murder, adultery, all sexual immorality, theft, lying, and slander. These are what defile you. Eating with unwashed hands will never defile you." See, the Pharisees got caught up in the little tiny religious details, and Jesus was saying, it's all what's in your heart is what matters. Now, this next story can be very tough at first when people first read it. They're like, oh my gosh, Jesus is so mean. Why would he say something like that? So there was this woman, and she was a Gentile. And in those days, the Israelites called the Gentiles dogs because they were all pagans. And that's why Jesus says, I go to the Jews first, then the Gentiles. Because the Jewish people, all the way back to Abraham, which we've been studying in the Old Testament, they were the ones that believed in the one true God, and the Gentiles were pagans of the day. Many of them came to believe in Jesus, and actually the funny thing is, a lot of the Jewish people, especially the Pharisees and Sadducees, they ended up denying Jesus as the Messiah, and many Gentiles came. But this woman is begging Jesus and hounding him and following him and persistent, saying, my daughter is demon possessed. Please come pray for her. You can heal her. And all the disciples were like, get rid of her. She's driving us crazy. But Jesus loved it because she was persistent and she believed and she had faith and she would not let it go. So let me read you what Jesus said, and then we'll put this in context. So what Jesus said says, I was sent only to help God's lost sheep, the people of Israel. But she came and worshiped him, pleading again, "Lord, help me." Jesus responded, "It isn't right to take food from children and throw it to the dogs." And her reply was this, "That's true, Lord, but even dogs are allowed to eat the scraps that fall beneath their master's table." And Jesus responded to her and said, "Dear woman," Jesus said to her, "your faith is great. Your request is granted," and her daughter was instantly healed. So what God was doing, Jesus, is he wasn't being rude and calling her a dog. What he was saying was, he wanted the people around that were saying, "Get rid of her." He wanted them to see that her faith was great, then her request was granted. Her daughter was instantly healed. So what Jesus was doing is showing the woman's humility and faith, which was greater than all the Pharisees that were walking around doubting him. Day 23, and we are in Psalm 19. And I'd love to read you some of this text. It says, "The instructions of the Lord are perfect, reviving the soul. The decrees of the Lord are trustworthy." We can trust that when God gives us instructions and decrees, he does it because he loves us and he wants to protect us and give us a blessed life. The commandments of the Lord are right, bringing joy to the heart. Reverence for the Lord is pure, lasting forever. The laws of the Lord are true. Each one is fair. They are more desirable than gold, even the finest gold. They are sweeter than honey, even honey dripping from the comb. And I love what it says underneath that. It says, there is a great reward for those who obey them. And at the very end of this psalm, and I have heard many churches decree this at the end of a service, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Jesus definitely is our rock. We can rely on him. We can stand on his word. We can believe that the miracles that happened in the biblical days happen today because God says, "I am the Lord thy God who changeth not." So the Proverbs for today is, we're in Proverbs 4, and it says, "Don't do as the wicked do, and don't follow the path of evildoers." Don't even think about it. Don't go that way. And I love what it says underneath that. The way of the righteous is like the first gleam of the dawn, which shines ever brighter until the full light of day. But the way of the wicked is like total darkness. They have no idea what they are stumbling over. I'll tell you what, I want to live in the light. I want to live in the light of Jesus because he promises us such a blessed life. And I want you to know how much he loves you and he desires every single day for you to turn to him. And going through this study, we are learning the character and the love of God so we can live the way he chooses us to live. Isn't that so beautiful? I promise you that's the best life in the world.